International Women's Day is a yearly event which was first organised by Clara Zetkin, a German sociologist in 1911. Unite the Union celebrated this day, beginning with What is Next for Women.
And let's be clear, the biggest threat to this government's agenda is women banding together and organising. And what I'm really pleased about is that Unite has a really strong women's movement within its structures. We have women's committees in every region, we have branch equality officers in every branch. We've got the Women's Week that takes place in July, we've got the National Women's Committee, and we've got our Women's Conference where we set out what our agenda is. Okay? So that our union and our government will listen to what is really going on for women out there. And what's really going on for women out there is that we are invisible most of the time. We are concentrated in the lowest sections of the labour market. We are working at ridiculous hours, whether it be 5 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 10 o'clock at night. We are working harder and harder and longer hours, maybe 2 or 3 part-time jobs or 0 hours contract jobs, where we're not getting paid the time that we move, perhaps from carer to carer, and where we're not getting a decent wage for the work that we're doing. And it's only by being part of the union, and only by being part of the union that's prepared to stand up for women, that we're going to make a difference.
Although other topics were also mentioned, such as immigration and the refugee crisis.
I mean, first and foremost, we have to stand, we need to stand together. We need to stand up for those people who haven't got a voice and running from persecution, running from war, which the West, were part of. Yeah, we're not immune to what's happened. We are part of it. What worries me the most is we have loads of debates about it, and the government's position is always, well, we'll just take a few. We won't take too many. We'll just take a few, and they shift slightly. But when it comes to children that have no parents and nothing, I don't understand I don't know what the blockage is there. They have nobody. They're on their own, and we're getting a lot of information that's coming through where children are going missing now. It's got to the point where children are actually being taken away, and only God knows what's happening to them. So not only is there a group of young people that haven't got anybody, we've got a group of young people who are basically being kidnapped and being taken, into the sex trade, or God knows. So the quicker we act, the better we do, and I will always speak up for that.
Later on in the day was the book launch of Paddling Furiously, which is the TUC's 10th survey of equality in the trade unions. You can find this survey online, or you can purchase the book.
Since then, over what is now nearly 30 years, we've produced 9 more, and this is therefore the 10th that I think you will work out. The titles have told a story, really, of a mixture of reality and politeness. And so after moving towards equality, we had still moving towards equality, a step closer to equality, struggling towards equality, inching towards equality, new moves towards equality. This was during the New Labour period. Waving, not drowning, treading water, swimming against the tide, and this one paddling furiously. And a big change occurred in 2008 when we decided that we would move from only surveying women, but to survey all the equality strands in trade unions. So you can imagine, as Caroline referred to it, this creates an enormous amount of work for those officers and administrators who actually complete the survey. And as ever, tremendous thanks to those that did it, because without them it would not exist, of course. The purpose of the survey is not to criticise trade unions, for heaven's sake, we wouldn't dream of doing that. It is really to draw together some really terrific examples of good practice which exist, innovative ideas which exist, but also to face unions with reality.
To end the celebration, a meeting was held to cover 100 years of the Irish women's resistance, which included talks about the Irish history and abortion rights.
In 1916, Dublin was one of the poorest cities of the kingdom, and by all the measures of poverty, welfare and health, the kingdom as it was then in 1916. In April, Dublin was steeped in mourning. The fearful toll of Gallipoli had destroyed the Dublin Fusiliers Regiment, among others, and was still being counted from among the called-up reservists or the young volunteer recruits less than 6 months earlier. The writer Kathleen Tynan remembered how the numbers of women at Sunday Mass wearing black was increasing week after week as with time passed. And April 1916 was also the first anniversary of the Second Battle of Ypres, where all the called-up reservists and the Dublin Fusiliers had also had very many casualties. So it was a very emotional time in the city. During the week of rebellion, Dublin women protested against it. These angry crowds were always written up as soldiers' wives and separation. They were the women and their children, depending on an enlisted man's income, who received a flat rate weekly payment with additions for each child. It brought many Dublin household incomes above the paltry wage levels that were paid to the men unskilled labourers who made up most of the city's army recruits and reservists. This money was also very unique in that it was paid directly to the woman, and she collected it weekly at the post office. So you can imagine in the kind of chaos and occupation of the post office and inner city women on the north side were absolutely these families lived hand to mouth, so they just wouldn't have had money that week. This simple but novel transaction between the state and the woman had become very freighted with meaning in wartime Ireland. The separation women were almost exclusively middle class. Their behaviour was constantly under scrutiny at the courts, in the press, and even on Sundays the separation women were preached at in churches as well. And they're kind of repeatedly represented as disorderly and disgraceful drunks, squandering their allowances at the public house while the husbands are away risking their lives. And this is a kind of a constant sort of theme that regardless of what, in fact, the courts the woman was being charged with, they would always, if she was in receipt of this allowance, they would always bring it up.
So as abortion rights secretary, we actually have a specific thanks to the trade union movement who have recognised the need to defend and extend abortion rights, even when it's not on the headlines and even when it's not necessarily directly under attack. And that matters a lot because the attack on abortion rights is constant, even when it's not in the headlines. And so there's a very special thanks as abortion rights that we give to the trade union movement, particularly for that. And I think it's really important for me to note as well that abortion rights wouldn't exist without the funding and political support from trade unions and the trade union movement, who rightly recognise that abortion is a working women's issue and a class issue. On International Women's Day, a day that should rightly be celebrated for all the achievements that women have collectively added to our society, I think it's right to be talking about abortion. Those of us campaigning for women's liberation know the importance of equal pay for equal representation of women on committees, in decision-making roles, and for visibility. The ability to control our own body and feel safe from violence underpins all of these achievements and ambitions. Next year, abortion rights will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the 1967 Abortion Act, which legalised abortion in certain circumstances and ended, at least for those in England, Wales and Scotland, the desperate backstreet abortion option. This law was hard fought for, and we recognise how important it is for women and society nearly 50 years on.